And we have Mathias here telling us about Plone Classic UI, a success story. Go ahead.
Thanks so much. So yeah, hello everybody. I'm Mathias, and my talk is about Plone 6 UI, a success story. This is a brief overview of my talk, so short introduction to myself, who I am, about the company I have, then why we chose Plone 6 Classic, what's the product we built on top of that to satisfy our customers, what's the tech stack beneath it. Then I will have some statistics and numbers from our first client that went online last year, Basel, and some overall numbers right now, what our system is doing. Then I'm gonna point out some challenges and also lessons learned. So yeah, I am a full stack developer. I worked with Plone for over 15 years. I had a gap in between where I moved over to Django for 4 or 5 years, but eventually I came back to Plone. I attended several conferences around 2010. I was, for example, in Brazil. I was in Arnhem and a couple other places I can't remember right now. And I also never thought to own a company. And fun fact about myself is I immigrated to the US 5 years ago during COVID to marry my wife. So I'm going back and forth between the US and Switzerland. I'm a Swiss originally, but now live in the US. So I did that 90 days fiancé thing that you guys can see on TV at times. So that's what I did. Short introduction about the Web Cloud 7 itself. So the company got founded in April 2022 in Switzerland, Lucerne. The founders are myself and Christoph Brütsch. He reached out to me and we founded the company. We bought customers from another company that were using Plone 4 and 5. We are right now 5 people. We started out with just 2 of us, and we are now 5. And our goal was to actually build and ship a standardized product for all our customers. So the goal was to upsell the new product to the current customers. And to actually standardize it, I tried that for many, many years and was never successful. So now I take a fresh approach. And yeah, so far it actually works, but we'll see in the future. It's always kind of hard to gauge how this goes. And also we have a standardized release management. First, I just released all the time because the system just worked. But then to keep our clients also happy and give them some sort of structure how the release is happening, we do 4 every year. And we just ship them out. They don't really have a say if they get it or not. They will get it anyway. Because for a long time, we usually were trapped on old Plone versions, and now that's no longer going to happen. We ship it anyway. So yeah, I've been in Finland already too, 10 years ago, very gorgeous. Traveled around in Lapland. We saw northern lights every day, which was amazing. But also Lucerne, where my company is, it's also not too bad if you see the scenery. So the problem we have basically, we're a new company, a small company, and the customer we bought, there was a certain urgency to actually upgrade them because they ran on super old, usually VMs with old operating systems, Python 2.7 dead since 5 years, Plone 4 dead since a long time ago, can't even remember. And Plone 5, by the way, Plone 5 was also Python 2.7. They were not migrated to Python 5.2 with Python 3. It was all very old. Then the other thing was I'm not a designer, so I have a hard time with that. And how are we going to deploy the new system that we're going to build for those customers? So the solution was that we decided to use the Plone Classic user interface, and we used this as a backend. We used the Plone REST API as a public-facing interface for everybody else. And we're going to partner up with other companies that are going to build the front end for us. We decided to use Kubernetes for the whole DevOps stack. And our plan was and still is to scale with technology and not necessarily with people. It might be necessary at times to hire more people, but if possible, we try to scale with better technology or with partner companies. So a little more details why we exactly chose the Plone 6, or why I chose the Plone 6 Classic user interface. First of all, we had like pressure to go on the market as soon as possible because we bought those customers and we had to deliver very fast. And I had like a lot of experience with the Classic user interface. And for me, like it was just kind of difficult to like get something else right away. I also looked at Django, for example, if I can speed up the development there on my end and get something new going, but that was not an option. And the other thing we decided, we're going to focus solely on the content creator. So we used the Plone Classic user interface only for data input and not for the anonymous user. This all go through the REST API. And also for myself, I'm a big fan of HTML and CSS and also Python. It's just easier for me to work with, and it's easier to test, and it's, for me, easier to upgrade. And we also can have separate release cycles. We have like our release cycle in the backend, that's 4 times a year. And the front end, depending on the phase you are there, you want to have a faster release cycle or a slower release cycle. There obviously are times where we have to sync up if I introduce or something gets introduced in the Plone REST API, or the front end has a demand for something, we have to sync up our releases, but otherwise they go completely independently. One of our front-end partners, they deploy whenever they feel like. I don't even realize it. It just happens. And that was great for us. So the front end usually is 100% geared to the customer, and the back end is 100% geared to the content creators. And also like back then in 2022, like all the through the web stuff worked great already. Like I use it all the time. The first thing we do if we start with a new client, I just configure all the content types, dexterity content types, and then we go. And I also still use at times some Python script at the end, so it's kind of nice to have those features still going. So why exactly not Volto back then? One of the main reasons for me was it was a somewhat steep learning curve on top of everything else. Having a new business, starting all over, having to do data migrations, this was just like too big of a step at that moment. And back then I thought I was not able to like get this all in time actually. And also our goal was to have a different user interface for authors and consumers, and Volto aims to be this what you see is what you get approach, and that's not what I try to achieve at all. We did that for 10, 15 years, obviously, with Plone, and this was one of the main reasons why we were not able to upgrade cheap enough. It was always upgradable, but we were too expensive for our customers to upgrade major Plone versions. But yeah, once again, Python, HTML, CSS, it's just a little easier for me, and the tech stack is a little bit lighter. So what we did on top of the Plone 6 Classic UI, first of all, we tried to use as much as possible from there. I tried to, like, whatever add-on or change I did, I had always in mind that I need to upgrade at some point. And so I tried to, like, code it in a way that I can easily upgrade to the next version of Plone. You can see there's like a lot of things I will dive into and touch base on. But yeah, it all starts with the Plone Classic user interface. The only thing we did basically to the user interface itself is we have a different color scheme, and that's it. So it is a standard Plone. Plone 6.1.2 as of right now. I know 6.1.3 came out. Will be deployed soon, but as of right now, it's 6.1.2. We use like their search interface, we use the folder content, so that way we can also immediately like benefit from improvements in that space, or if we can improve something into the Plone core, we get it back as soon as possible as well. Or also like you can see here, we always like configure all the content types through the web, and yeah, that's all standard Plone with the classic user interface. I know some of that stuff in the meanwhile you can do in Volto as well, but back then this was just a more comfortable way and faster way to do it for me at least. So the first add-on I built was, of course, my own page builder, because why not? No, I had like a different opinion how things should build, and in my opinion, it was like I want to have the block types should be dexterity content types, so I can still configure them through the user interface, the classic user interface there, and I used the Bootstrap theme grid component, and you can just like basically add columns, add rows, do whatever the grid can, and then you add your blocks in there. It's very similar concept to Volto actually. Also the data structure is very similar that gets put out through the REST API in the end. And also this is fairly opinionated and geared towards our clients, how they actually work. The other thing that was needed, and I built that actually before that Plip came out, I think, I implemented a trash option there because I was kind of getting sick of restoring data for customers through CP4 storage, for example, and they delete stuff all the time they didn't want to. So this is a simple trash implementation. It basically it moves the content to a dedicated area. It takes away all the view permissions, and one of the big tricks was like to set allows role and user to an empty list in the index, so you can never see and find it. And if you accidentally find something in the trash, you don't have the view permission, and it's fine. And yeah, you can just restore whatever you want. In theory, you can also restore it to a different place if you want to. And it's also very fast. It doesn't do much to it. And the other thing was our clients, because it's not what you see is what you get, they still wanted to know how will my page look once I'm done putting data in and see it, how it's going to look online. So we have like a preview feature where you can either split your screen, like here, and work on the data, and the split screen, like the front end automatically updates if you change anything in the backend. And at the same time, I was able to put in also like a mobile preview, for example. The implementation is very simple. It's an iframe, and you pass an auth token over there, so the user is authenticated if he works in a private space. And then so he can see how his site looks, and if he's satisfied, he can publish it, and the site will look exactly how he desired. But that was one of the most important things we had to build, basically, is because the audit view, if you look here on the left, it's very abstract. And so in order to give them the option to see how the page looks like, actually, it was very important. And like, yeah, phone preview and tablet preview was just a fun thing I was able to do at the same time. Another thing I have built on top is a working copy and versioning implementation. I wasn't able to use Plone Iterate for various other reasons, and also, again, some very opinionated reasons as well. It basically creates an actual copy with copy and paste in Plone with like all the blocks in there, but not the site structure. And then you can work on it again. The preview works there as well. And then you can create new versions if you want to, or you can start like a review process where you can ask other people to check out what you did, and then you can publish again. And yeah, the whole reason for that is so that the original website is still online while they're working on a new one. Or yeah, like I said, you can also create versions and restore them. Like working copy and versions is the exact same code base. Another thing that's on top of it is like a lot of our customers, for whatever reason, they generate a lot of PDFs, so they still want to have like a printed out version of maybe their website or whatever they have. So I've built a small PDF service based on AIO, HTTP, VCPrint, and URLlib. And that thing just runs as well, and we can generate PDFs with that. And also like the PDF, the HTML for the PDF is also simple HTML and CSS. That's how VCPrint works. It's great. You can just have a different view for every content type, basically, and just send it over. And then it just does its magic, and you get a PDF back. Then that's one of the crazier things we did there. So a lot of, like some of our customers, they have like external API data that they want to like funnel through Plone and get it out again through the Plone REST API. And so I've built a system there where you can generic configure like an adapter, and that thing does authentication like OAuth or whatever, collects the data, gets it back into Plone, and then you have like some conversion scripts you can do where you can like cherry pick the data out of the response, transform it, and then you can store it either in Redis or you can store it directly in a dexterity field. And on the bottom left corner, you see an example what it does right now. So for example, it does occupancy and water and temperature measurements. And those are all different APIs. They're running somewhere. It collects the data, stores it, and delivers it through the REST API to the front end. And what's in there too is like there's some automation. You can like put in an interval and tell, yeah, please refresh the data every 10 minutes, every 15 minutes, every hour. And that's all done through Redis and like the RQ-Python and Redis and the scheduler in there. Yeah, there's a little bit more to it, but that's roughly what it does. And it's as generic as possible again. Then another thing is what we use is collective Elasticsearch. That's a great product I use that got built by the community. And I did some extensions to it, like blob indexing, async block indexing through Redis. And then on top of that, in our product, I added like a separate endpoint, ES search endpoint that automatically triggers Elasticsearch to give the results back. The standard implementation is basically you can configure in collective Elasticsearch, like if searchable text is in the query string to the search, it uses Elasticsearch. If not, it uses the Plone catalog. So here I wanted an endpoint that explicitly always gets triggered. And also I add server-side configurations by default. So for example, aggregations or suggestions. In Elasticsearch, you can configure so much in there. And this all happens on the backend. So we can basically define how the API looks towards the front end. There's a lot of more stuff going on in there, but that's basically the main part is collective Elasticsearch, just not all of it. I also implemented a raw search endpoint because we realized very, very fast that if we pull in external data into Elasticsearch, we also, like they don't have a representation in Plone, so you need to access them in one way or the other. So we have a raw search endpoint where you can like send queries directly, or not directly, but almost directly to Elasticsearch. But I added a security layer so it keeps all rows and users in there so you can only see data you're supposed to see. The other thing we have in there, another great product from the community is the PaaS plugins OIDC. We use that for most of our clients. Obviously, we had also some that are like, no, we don't use that. We still need SAML authentication. So what I did, basically, I took the concept and how the other plugin was written, basically copy-pasted it and adapted it for SAML auth for a more recent product because there was nothing around for Plone 6 for SAML auth. And now we add that. And yeah, it's I mean, in the middle, it works very great. We use it like for some customers, and we have a lot of users logging into that. And one thing that helped me a lot, because I always had issues configure SAML the right way, so I built a little helper form where you can upload the federation metadata XML from the identity provider, and it automatically configures your service provider, your Plone system. And it's also end-to-end tested with Keycloak, and there's documentation for Entra ID and other stuff. So check it out if you didn't have to, if you did have to. So then the other thing is performance. I will touch on that later. It's all running in a Kubernetes cluster, so it had an impact on performance with all those layers of virtualization. And there, if you don't know it, a great tool is PySpy. You can basically sample any Python program and see where it uses the most time. And you can do it on a production system as well. Just keep in mind it like slows down your system depending on your sample rate. So just be careful, but you can, with like, if you have a Docker environment or any container environment, you can just spin up a debug node, start your system, install PySpy, and see what's happening. Then I had like, once again, very opinionated improvements for the REST API, because I had like a specific target audience. Basically, I just was able to like cache a lot of internal stuff that it's not possible in standard Plone, but I was able to. Like for example, do not like automatically prevent expands. You can expand like content navigation or context navigation, and that was just expensive. So this prevents that automatically. I also realized there's like a if you have Plone Classic UI and REST API, the REST API still go through Diazo, which did not make sense. So I took that out. I think it's not a problem if you have a classic Volta site, but that was like 2 or 3% of the time for every request. So it was like an interesting find. And then one thing that helps a lot is like apply a sort limit to all catalog requests if possible. So depending what comes in, like if you have a search result 100,000 pages and you show the first 20, you just sort the first 20 and then you stop. Obviously, if the user goes back to page 10, you have to sort the first 10 pages. But still, if you have 100,000 results, it's better to sort 100 pages than 100,000 pages. So keep in mind that's like an interesting trick here to like make some stuff faster. And then cache as much as possible. Cache the API, cache the front end, and then once you cache everything, you also want to invalidate. That's the tricky part then. I'll come to that. But yeah, did put a lot of effort into the performance of the system there. Another thing is asynchronous tasks. I use RQPython for that. It's an interface for Redis basically, and that adds some like neat features. And I use that for cache invalidation. I use it for Elasticsearch, so indexing bigger, larger blob files or whatever. All happens asynchronously, not at the same time the user uploads the file. We use it for PDF generation and other tasks, and also for scheduled tasks and repeating tasks. So if a user, for example, publishes a new news site and the effective date is in 10 days, it creates a task in 10 days to invalidate the cache when that thing should appear on the website. Also, we use Redis. I use it also for other caching purposes, and there's a little dashboard that shows you what's going on in Redis right now. Okay, these were like a lot of those little features I built on top of it. There's much more, but there's no time to talk about everything. And the tech stack, as you can see, is like the Plone Classic UI, ZEO storage, not rel storage. I had interesting discussions already about that, so maybe I have to change my mind. Elasticsearch, as I said, there's like a couple other things, but the most interesting parts basically are it's all built on Kubernetes and Cloudflare. Cloudflare, we just chose that provided you can choose any other caching service basically as well. So Kubernetes, we use it on Exascale, which is a European hoster. It got completely built with the help of 6 Feet Up. I know they're somewhat infamous in the meanwhile, but they still have a lot of good people at their company. And for me, it was the easiest way to get Kubernetes cluster going at Exascale. The goal was basically to invest 1 year's worth of salary of a system engineer, have the cluster going, and then only maintaining it without having to hire a system engineer for multiple years, because it would have run out of work after a year anyway. So that was basically the goal. Also, like the whole deployment and upgrade process should be fully automated. Everything about network security, it should be easy to scale. So all that the Kubernetes cluster basically gives us. This is a quick overview of the services we have. It's not a full list, but it's like what basically is in there. So outside of the cluster, we obviously have Cloudflare, which protects the API, might protect the website. We use workers on Cloudflare as well. We use their web access firewall. And then the Kubernetes cluster has all the website stuff in there. And then on the side, we also have S3 for backups. And we have Keycloak for authentication on the side. Very important, what we do have right now, we have a different subdomain for backend and API, so we can apply different caching rules depending on where the request comes in. That's very important. Or we can also, for example, tell like don't allow bots on the API or only allow certain bots or whatever. We can like fine-grain that, and we can now cache roughly 90% more of all our requests. Don't even see Plone. They get either cached by the front end or get cached by the API, so hardly anything pushes actually through. This is a screenshot. This is like a week of all the requests on our API on the cluster. And you can see it's like roughly 5 million, yeah, it's like roughly 800,000 requests a day, but literally only 10% actually push it through. So the blue line is what Plone has to serve, and the orange line is what Cloudflare or the caching service does for us. So there are a couple guidelines if I work with external companies that build the front end that you have to like make sure they don't do. So I usually, besides giving them the Plone REST API documentation, I tell them a couple things not to do because it makes caching or the invalidation of the cache super hard. So for example, if they use on every request expand navigation, if a navigation item changes, I have to like invalidate the whole website, which doesn't make sense. So I tell them, since it's cached anyway, please use the add navigation endpoint and don't expand it, because then I can invalidate that thing once and it's done, and I don't have to invalidate everything else. There are like other things you have to pay attention to, like if you build like certain endpoints that should not be cached, like a search or a dashboard, we have to talk to each other so I can configure the service accordingly. And yeah, more requests no longer hurt us. Like before, without like good caching, like 10 requests at a time were hard, but in the meanwhile, it doesn't really matter anymore. And also very important, like don't use query strings with other time-sensitive informations in there, because that makes it impossible to cache as well. So that's just like a little pep talk I gave to front-end developers if they start using the Plone REST API on our stack. That's not valid for the Plone REST API in general, obviously, but it's valid for when they work with us. What we use from Cloudflare exactly is like, yeah, their cache, their web access firewall. We protect the API with that. We manipulate like some headers. You can mitigate like attack vectors very easy with that. We do redirects, and we use their worker and pages, for example, for like for maintenance pages and stuff like that. You can use that very easily. This is like, yeah, it's hard. It's kind of hard to see, but those are like some numbers. It's a Grafana dashboard. So we have Loki in the Kubernetes cluster that collects all the information. And that's a dashboard where you can see like the amount of requests. And the interesting part is like all the requests that actually came through Plone got actually replied very fast. And this like shows roughly 24 hours. And yeah, we had a super smooth go live with that customer too. They had like on the first day, it was over 1 million requests on the front end, and it just worked. There's some more numbers here. You can see like the, from like I think last week or 2 weeks ago, you can see that's the amount of requests through the API, cached or not cached, and that's the amount of requests directly on the website. So you can also see at the very end, you can see a spike that you don't even see on Plone, because it was all cached already anyway. So yeah, Basel-Land was our first customer that went online with our product. And since then, the front end was never down. So it was 100% available, even though, that's the important part, we had like one Kubernetes upgrade we did, where because we use ZTO storage, it was down for like 30 seconds or 40 seconds, because it got reallocated a new pod in the Kubernetes cluster and had to mount the volumes, and that was a whole thing. And the other one, Cloudflare had issues once too. They had like, they had to mitigate an attack, and they had issues, I think with their DNS service or whatever, and that took the backend away for a little bit, but the front end kept going because everything was cached. Yeah, I installed like 29 releases at the beginning for that customer in like 2 or 3 months. And thanks to like the Kubernetes stack, everything just worked. Nobody felt anything about those upgrades. Now we do 4 upgrades a year only. And we went from Plone 6, one of the early beta releases, now all the way to Plone 6.1.2. So yeah, what's going on now at our company? So we have like 4 websites online. We have another 58 school sites to come. We have Amnesty International that will go online at the beginning of the year. We have City of Bern Sports Tip Martin that will go live. And as you can see, they have different front-end design agencies that build that. So some use SvelteKit, some use something else. We hired last year one more person that does some in-house front-end stuff. Too, if it's like a smaller project, we realized it's kind of an overhead and very expensive to get an external company to do that. So we started doing like small things ourselves. But the thing is, even right now with all the tests, like everything as a test system, integration system, we have a lot of sites running, and they all have, though, even though like Amnesty International Switzerland is more like a marketing site and shout out article site, and the Basel Land is a canton, like a government entity, they all use the same, it's the exact same code base. The only difference is configuration. So for example, Amnesty will have like basically 50 different block types, and Basel has like 3, and the school sites are entirely different as well, but it's all the same code base. So as of right now, it is a product. I will call it a product because it's all the same. So some of the challenges I accounted is, especially like Kubernetes is a little bit of magic to me at times. Like I don't know exactly what's all is going on, but the thing is that's why we partnered up with a company that helps us like dealing with those challenges. But what I learned is very fast that the read-write speed on the volume, like it's so much slower compared to like obviously direct SSD access. So that's also why I had to like optimize a lot of performance related stuff. Like Elasticsearch is used for more than just a search. I try to strip down the catalog as much as possible because it's the one thing that slows most of the requests down. So yeah, that was one of the big parts. And then it was only one developer for the backend. That was me. So yeah, there was like no diversity. There was always only one opinion, and I was always right. Nobody was there to challenge me, basically. And another thing is testing. Where do you start testing? Where do you stop? I just had to make sure I try to like follow a little bit like my gut feeling and my experience to like not test everything, but to test as much as possible and enough to make sure, for example, when I went from Plone 6.1 to 6.1.2, from Plone 6.0 to Plone 6.1, a couple things changed, and all my tests that failed were at the right place. So I was able to fix it, and then it worked. So it's a big challenge. Where do you start and when do you stop? Just testing everything doesn't make sense. That's too expensive usually, or uses too much time. And I learned a lot about Kubernetes as well, but I think still not enough I can manage it right now myself, but if I have to do some major changes, I always will depend on external people to help me. So lesson learned. The Plone REST API, it's amazing. It works really good. We heard that multiple times in many talks, but it really is great and works really good. Also the documentation, through their approach of documentation first, like I can literally just throw that at an external company, tell them half an hour how it works, and off they go. They might ask at times some small things, but they can do most just themselves, this is amazing. Also, what we proved ourselves is that we can basically use Plone with the classic user interface as a headless CMS. So we focus on that right now. In theory, we could also install Volta at some point there because the REST API is the interface to the outside world. So how the user enters the data in the end doesn't really matter. It just has to be possible. And then one thing, for example, technical documentations. Usually way too late, but with AI in the meanwhile, especially writing documentations, actually it's really fast and helps a lot. Then not everything needs to be automated. Like in my mind as a software developer, I love to automate everything, but I had to like make a step back at certain parts that I'm like, it doesn't have to be happening right now. It's not worth the time and effort to put into certain things. And then some stuff with Kubernetes. So if you don't use rel storage like I do, there are some options. You want to have like read-write once volumes and not anything else because it's going to be super slow. Then shared volumes, it sounds really good until it doesn't. I relearned a lot of things about the SATO-DB, how and where it loses time. Yeah, thanks. I should get more help. Like I said, it was only me, one developer, and only one opinion, so no diversity. So I should have probably at certain times ask other people first, what's their opinion about a certain thing, because the Plone community probably would be there even for that, but I was not. I just was in my head and just did my thing, and I for sure learned that was not the right way. Yeah, and then you have to cache literally as much as possible, especially on our case if it's anonymous user only, like you just try to cache everything. And then also try to invalidate at times. Otherwise the customer will not be happy if it's like still the old state. That was it, more or less. Maybe one thing I forgot is like a lot of that stuff is open source, but not everything. So if there's a list of links at the end of the presentation, what's all there. There's a couple more things, but some stuff is not open source just for the reason it's in a closed source repository. But I have no issues if anybody else needs anything or wants anything to create a package. But it has to be worth the effort because some stuff is very opinionated and it might not be suitable for like the whole community. But if there's anything that sounded interesting or you were curious how that got solved, then we can talk and I can potentially build a package there. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, questions for Mathias?
Can you just show the slide with the links again?
Oh, you can download it. I hope, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. You can get the slide somehow.
For the people on the internet.
Thank you very much. Where are you storing the S3 buckets? On the cloud or in some physical server as well?
Not the cloud. Exascale provides that service on the box, and it's just like we use Longhorn IO as for the volumes, and there's a setting in there. Just put in the credentials of the bucket.
Do you know what they are using? Chef, Minio? No.
I don't have to care.
Okay.
And I'm happy about that.
All right, thank you for the talk, very interesting. Just one thing, you mentioned that after we restart, the catalog is slow, just one ID, but said without experience actually, but I think there's a catalog query plan which you can actually persist, so I wonder if that would help, but I haven't tried it myself.
No, it could. The problem is though, it is so slow. Like it's just like reading like the metadata part of the catalog, for example, like it's slow. It's just not fast. Like, I mean, it's not like it takes 5 seconds, but it takes like for the first query or whatever. Yeah, the query plan probably would help. But like if I run it on my MacBook, we're talking 10 milliseconds. And on the cluster, it's like 500 milliseconds. And with like, if you restart and I clear the cache or whatever, I get immediately 50,000 hits or like a lot of hits onto the Plone system. And then it matters if it's slow. So yeah, I know what you mean. I think that's maybe one thing I would probably would do now is I would go and like buy physical servers and run the cluster on there. I realized that like just to implement the whole system would have been the same price point, but it would be probably like 5 or 10-fold faster than what I have right now. So yeah, that would help. But I had customers with like 30 or 40 gigabyte data FS, and it was not a problem. And now it's like 8 or 10 gigabytes, and it's a problem. So I feel like the issue is somewhere. It has to be. I would rather solve it right now with better hardware than on the software level.
Thank you. Let's give an applause.